we've got going on. Our next panel is exploring how government agencies can support nonprofits. And we know how important the nonprofit sector is in the recovery process. They're providing vital services in recovery efforts, and coordinating their work with government resources is really crucial for an effective recovery. So our moderator for this next panel is Jim White, who is the Executive Director of the Nonprofit Association of Oregon. And NAO is the state association supporting leadership, capacity, and a voice for charitable nonprofits across the state of Oregon. And so before joining NAO, Jim had worked for Mercy Corps, both overseas and in Oregon. And he's worked in International Organization for Migration, the American Red Cross. And he's got specific skills and experience leading response to humanitarian disasters all over the world, providing disaster response and recovery programming, emergency food, shelter, public health support to displaced people and vulnerable populations. So with that, let's welcome Jim and our panelists to the stage. I guess they're already on the stage, and you come on up. All right.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Yep, great. All right. Well, thank you, Ben, for that introduction. And I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves. But before I do, we don't have a PowerPoint, so you don't have to look at anything. This is going to be a conversation, and we hope to have some audience participation, although it probably won't be as well as the last trauma-informed group did around movement. So feel free to get up and move yourselves if you need to. Or I don't know, maybe, Jeana, are you going to lead everybody in calisthenics? Yeah. So this session is about what nonprofits have learned that we can reflect back positively for better collaboration in the future. There's a lot of learnings that went into what happened in 2020 and since and before. Remember, there were disasters before we had the 2021 wildfires here, 2020 wildfires here in Oregon. And so we have this opportunity again and again, and we don't want to squander it. So we really want to appreciate both Lane County and University of Oregon for actually convening this discussion and having this ability to come together and talk about what's happening. If I could, and this is not meant in any way to embarrass anyone, this is just a real fact check. If you're with government in some form or another, can you raise your hand? Okay, now, if you're, well, no, keep your hands up. Now, how many of you were in your current position doing what you're doing in 2020? Okay, there's the difference, right? All of these people were exactly in those communities in 2020, right? So there is an enormous opportunity here to hear some, I think we've resolved that we're not going to gripe, but we are going to put forward some positive reinforcement, let's call it, on what we think could really help our government colleagues better collaborate and coordinate with the nonprofit sector. And we know many of you are new to those roles, as you just saw. So we're all in this together. We all have to fix some of these systems going forward. So with that, I'm going to ask from Allyson around to just briefly say your name, just introduce yourself, your name, the organization you're with, and the local area if it isn't obvious from the name of the organization.
Okay, I'm Allyson, as you stated, Allyson West. I am in Lincoln County with the Long-Term Recovery Group. And we were formed in response to the Echo Mountain fire in Otis, Oregon, which is just north of Lincoln City, probably where a lot of you vacation.
Hi, I'm Devin Thompson, Executive Director, McKenzie Valley Long-Term Recovery Group, Holiday Farm Fire, third generation, Lower McKenzie, right, Melanie? Thank you. So thank you, Jim, for having us here, and thank you, Jim, for helping us when we were forming our organization, and thank you to the UO and Lane County.
I sat in the middle so I wouldn't have to talk. Y'all messed up. My name is Caryn Wheeler Clay. I'm the director of the Jackson County Community Long-Term Recovery Group. We are supporting, covering, crying at the 2020 Almeida and South Oakland fires.
Jeana Beam with Glide Revitalization. We also house the long-term recovery group for the Archie fire in 2020, and we're in Douglas County, which is about an hour south of here for everybody that doesn't know where that is.
Hi, I'm Deana Freres. I'm president of the board of directors for the Santiam Canyon Long-Term Recovery Group. Our fire was the Beachy Creek fire. Also, it kind of combined with Lion's Head, and sometimes it's called the Santiam fire, depending on which agency is describing us. But essentially, we are just off of Highway 22, east of Salem, Detroit Lake area. And let's see, is that all I'm supposed to do?
And almost all the way over in, you cross two counties.
Oh, yes,
That's
we're cross
important.
jurisdictional. The Santiam River is the geographic boundary between Marion and Lynn County. So we had a lot of success. I mentioned that yesterday with our county governments really coming in line seamlessly to support the effort. So that's a success.
Great. So I want to give each of them just a few minutes at the top here to just sort of state some of the things that are on top of their mind about the experience that they had, because each of their experience is very different. And that in of itself is telling. Part of that is telling because it's coming up from community, but also it's telling because sometimes working with the county does not equal working with the county, does not equal working with the county, right? Or working with, I'm going to pick on Ed, ODHS does not equal working with ODHS in a different part of the state. And so I wanted them to have a chance to just say a few words at the top here about their experience and what's been good. And I'll let you go last now, the opposite way, since you had to go first last time. So do you want to start, Deana?
I too could channel Whitney Houston, but I don't think anybody wants that.
So we want to hit that high C.
No.
Come on.
Yeah, so reframe your question or restate your question. You want to know what worked well from community up as far as our relationship with
Collaborating specifically with government. What worked well in the Santiam Canyon for you?
I think humbly what really worked well is that we had, I'm going to borrow what you just framed at the table. We had our table set thanks to our hospital and community connections through our service integration team. So we had lots of community members that were already working with DHS and knew who to call, even with emergency management. So the great thing that we saw in the days early, when I closed my eyes and imagined sitting in this auditorium that we were able to host our immediate recovery meetings. I'll see a lot of heads nodding. There were lots of you there. We had the table set, and there was a place at the table for everyone, regardless of what we thought an agency could or was supposed to do. We just knew if we knew somebody that was doing something at the Capitol or doing something at one of the agencies in Salem, we invited them to come and participate. And I would say this many moons later, we still have a direct audience. Even though the faces have changed, we feel supported, and I know that we're getting, I don't directly communicate with Ed Flick or Director Bell, but I'm often CC'd on emails, and I'm seeing direct responses and big communication. So when set the table and invite everyone, and then have some extra chairs, because you never know like who else you're going to need. So I would just encourage just open dialogue and communication, and keep asking the questions and knocking down the doors until we figure out who's the best person to step in and support. So
that's a good start. Yeah,
that's a good start.
Yeah, great. Jeana?
I would have to say, I mean, we kind of were the opposite end, as we didn't have a table. We didn't know where the place settings were, and we weren't sure how to set it up if somebody told us how. So we kind of came in, same situation, in an auditorium with a bunch of people in the community that just knew there was a need. And where we got really lucky is we somehow got it right. we were doing what we needed to do. And when the agencies started coming in, we like to call them the alphabet agencies, but I don't know if that's just us. So, what we were doing, they were willing to immediately support. And so we were able to quickly compared to some of the other programs I've seen enacted, such as like OHCS, you know, we're all frustrated with the process there. But within, I would say, 8 months, we actually had support from ODHS and stuff for ours. Where we got lucky was we had Ford Family Foundation and Oregon Community Foundation that came in and were like, here's unrestricted funding, do whatever you need with it until something else comes in. So had we not known the right people, known the agencies to call, we would have been in a way rougher situation moving forward. I recognize the faces at the table. I know we have a good relationship where we can call and reach out and say, which we have more than once because I don't have much of a filter, this isn't working. This isn't going to work for us. And we've been lucky in that I feel like that's been heard. And I guess one of the biggest things I've learned through this is not to be afraid to say that. Like if something isn't working and it's not ever going to work for your organization or your area, you have to say that, otherwise nobody knows. So.
Before Caryn, before you go, I'm just wanting to make a comment on what Jeana said, because one of the situations that I think all the LTRGs and Glide Revitalization, before they housed the LTRG, were confronted with was a system that the FEMA voluntary agency liaisons basically said, this is how you do it. And there was very little sort of flexibility in that plan. And I think one of the things that we want to help, and I'm sorry that Congresswoman Hoyle had to leave already, but I am going to make sure that we connect with her later. If she's going to put FEMA back at a cabinet level position, that would be great. But we need to fix it first. There are some really, really fundamental issues in the way that FEMA responds to wildfires in particular, that it was an agency built out of East Coast hurricanes and sort of middle America tornadoes. Wildfires are very new to FEMA, and every one of the FEMA VALs that deployed said they'd never been to a wildfire before in their career. Even if they'd had 30 years in their career, they'd never been to a wildfire before, and it's a different thing. So I think that flexibility that you're trying to point out there and telling people what's not working when they're going off of a script, a plan that they have been given that like, this is the way it works. You know, I know, Brandy, you said a couple of times expert versus experience. Well, after 3 years, you are experts now. So you need to be willing and able to wear that mantle. So Jeana, I just wanted to comment on that because I could see that directly with what happened with Glide Revitalization. Am I about to be preempted by the governor? Is that what's about to happen? Where's Hannah? No, okay. Caryn.
Why I brought everything I own up here, but you know, I ended up in this position after being recruited to the Emergency Operations Center by one of my former bosses, who I think the only reason she asked me to do it was because she knows I'm not good at hearing the word no. And I have persisted in not being good at hearing the word no, because all of us are tasked with making the asks of our neighbors. We are put in rooms to ask questions that not everyone wants to answer. And so for me, what has worked really well in this is the relationships, right? I was at a meeting last week, and someone I have worked with since essentially day one reminded all of us that while they might work for a state agency, they are not the state agency, right? They are our neighbor. And that is what is getting us through. Those are where the successes and the wins are, the neighbor to neighbor interactions. Some of our neighbors are very influential. And some of them are influential in ways they don't understand. So what has worked well for our organization has been those immediate infusion of flexible dollars where it wasn't, how are you going to report on your metrics? How are you going to meet these things that are within our strategic plan, but maybe not yours, right? How are you going to align your organization to our compliance structures? It was about, here's some money, do the most good you can, do the next best thing. And so those relationships enabled us to demonstrate our ability to move money. You know, the Jackson County Community Long-Term Recovery Group, we gave $2.2 million to our neighbors last year through the unmet needs table. You know, we helped bring 380 of our neighbors home permanently. And in that narrative, we have had state agencies who have said, we see the work you're doing, and we see that you have a sense of where the gaps are. How can we help fund that? And so in that space, you know, that is why we have a housing recovery director that's been funded by Oregon Housing and Community Services, right? So again, all of us have relationships with state agencies. It is not the same relationship for all of us. So the flexibility and the ability to sort of get out of our own ways instead of saying no, saying, you know, I'm not sure, let's figure out how to make that work, is a much more trauma-informed and seamless ability to move the resources into community. Devin, did you go for a run?
Over to you.
I went for a run. So
Good.
things are good.
Yep.
I'm sure I'm going to miss a lot here, but I want to back up a little bit. You know, what I think helped prepare me for this was I was in the Coast Guard, and then out of the Coast Guard, I did surf rescue, motor lifeboat coxswain. Got out of the Coast Guard, went into the wood products industry, worked in research and development. Then I was semi kind of taking a break, working on the family farm. We were doing some work on the barn, and the holiday farm fire happened. And it was like, hey, we need to set up a relief center. And it was my wife and the connections with Jared Pruch and Matt McRae and others that they made this approach. And they said, hey, Devin, you know what? There's a relief center that needs to be set up. And so we set one up at the historic fish hatchery, and we were there until March. And then the county, along with Jared, sent someone out named Caryn Anders from Okanagan Long-Term Recovery Group. She said, hey, Devin, you know what? You need to start a long-term recovery group. And I said, hey, Caryn, no. I didn't know what a long-term recovery group was. I don't think many of us did know what a long-term recovery group was. She said, I don't take no for an answer. And I said, well, you need to learn to take no for an answer because I'm not going to do it. We decided to go ahead and take a trip, my wife and I, to Okanagan and visit with Caryn Anders. And that's when we learned about really what a long-term recovery group was. And then we also learned from the Matau Housing Trust what a land trust was about and how you bring back fire survivors from that area. So I came back to the McKenzie Valley, and I reached out to some community members, and I said with them, you know, I'm not going to do this, but you can, and I will help you. And they said, sure, as long as you're going to chair this. So I took that on. And then before I knew it, I was the executive director. But it took a lot of time, and you know, a lot of team building, working with Jared, United Way, working with Jim, you know, working with DHS. You know, it's those relationships, you know, Shauna Jepson's back here, you know, it's all those relationships and time and building that really built this organization to where it is today. And we really couldn't be here today without Ford Family Foundation, OCF, United Way, Meyer, all of them. You know, we have some individuals here from the COAD as well. So the reason we have been successful, we haven't hit $2 million, but last year we were 1.42, I think it was $1.425 million out the door to fire survivors. And that's a big thank you to everyone and everybody that's doing this work.
Thanks. Allyson?
I don't even know that I fully remember what the question was, but at this point, everybody's answers are so different. As far as the beginning stages, I came into the disaster recovery world in Oregon, like about a year after the fires, and I came on under a grant with Habitat for Humanity doing disaster recovery, and I was tasked with chairing the Unmet Needs Roundtable and basically developing what a long-term recovery group is for Lincoln County. And so I worked with the steering committee of leaders in Lincoln County, and then others such as Caryn Lang and FEMA and a whole slew of others that may or may not still be with us. But I then was given the opportunity to become the executive director from a grant that we received from Ford and through our partnership with our county commissioner, Katie Jacobson. And then I switched from chairing the unmet needs to leading the long-term recovery group. I relied heavily on the people up here to learn what the heck we were supposed to be doing because I had never worked in a nonprofit world before. I had never worked in this structure. The only disasters I was familiar with were hurricanes down in the South, and down there it's very different. You know what to expect. You've got churches, you've got the Cajun Navy, you've got, your first responders, and everybody just jumps into action. And there's an established structure. And so it was very interesting to come here where there was no established structure, right? The Department of Emergency Management looked very different from what I was used to. Local government was very different in the way that they responded, emergency management responded. And so I learned how to navigate that and build relationships through a lot of the people in this room, especially my peers. And I attended all of their meetings. I asked everybody to invite me to all of their meetings, like Melissa and everyone, so that I could learn what it is they're doing all over the state and what we needed to do in Lincoln County. So we started a little bit later than everyone else. And I would say our success is, primarily due to the willingness of others to share and, bring us in on what they're doing and not gatekeep information, being willing to extend an invitation to others, us on our little island on the coast, to learn from them. And I think that that's something that we need to continue to do throughout the state, is to continue to gather, whether informally or formally, so we can share what's going on that's going well for us, and then also learn from our mistakes. I learned so much from all of their mistakes, later on. And, I wish I had, one of the things we wish we had done differently was have our own in-house case management. We, however, followed the original, VOAD structure of, you're just going to have a disaster case management committee, and you are going to bring together all of these different agencies, Catholic Charities and ODHS, and they're all going to do the case management. And you're just going to facilitate meetings. We had no information from them. I didn't have ROIs with ODHS. I don't have any of this information. And so yesterday when Katie Jacobson mentioned that was one of the things that she would do differently on the county level, I agree that that's something that we could have done differently. And I learned a lot from this crew, what we could do, what we should have done, but yeah.
Allyson, you said a little bit, we had a Zoom call last week. I want you to say a little bit more about that, the instrumental role that having a county commissioner involved in the disaster was for you. And I know it was for others as well.
Yeah, so a little bit about the relationship with county government, which was one of my first relationships with them. I'd say one of the things that I really appreciate about working with our commissioner and even Representative Gomberg is there's a culture of commitment versus compliance. And I think that that's something that we need to spread across all these other agencies. I think with emergency management, there's this tendency to, you follow these rules and you do these things and everybody needs to do what you say and be compliant. And that doesn't really work when working with community organizations and the actual people on the ground and working in your community. You need to build that relationship and build that commitment, show that you're committed to them and they in turn will be committed to you. So I'm committed to Katie Jacobson, not because she's my commissioner, but because she showed up to my meetings every week. She literally showed up with the shovel. That's why she's the shovel lady, right? Because she's physically in the dirt doing what needs to happen. And I know she's committed to this recovery. And so in turn, when she calls, I answer because I'm committed to her. The same thing with, I feel like I've started to be able to develop that relationship with people like Shauna, right? If we have an event and I invite her, she's coming. And so if there's something that I need to do, if the state were to ask me to do something, I'm going to do it for Shauna because she's physically out there. And it's not even physically being there, just being on the meetings, having these conversations and being willing to share information. I got where did Ross go? I was going to call out Ross. He was not willing to howl at the moon earlier during the last session. And so I would say I would not be very committed to him. I would just do whatever he tells me out of compliance because there wasn't that give and take relationship, right? And so I think that we need to really bring that forward in how we interact with our emergency managers and things like that. I understand. We got to follow protocols. We got to have these plans, but somewhere in there, we have to develop that relationship so that we're moving forward with commitment, right?
Great. Thanks,
That
Allyson.
makes sense,
Thank you.
hopefully.
So
If you can follow.
yeah, no, that was great. I want to popcorn this a little bit right now, and then we're going to get into some questions from all of you. And I still have plenty of questions I can ask our colleagues here. But Caryn, did you want to talk a little bit about your regional long-term recovery plan?
A little bit, or like, do I get another 3 hours?
No, you get a little bit. You get a little bit.
This is, I think, a major bragging point because I'm really proud of our community, right? We created the nation's first multi-jurisdictional disaster recovery plan, right?
That's a big deal. I've heard Caryn talk about working on this plan for so long, and I've never known what the heck she's talking about. So this is a big deal. It's like 177 pages, by the way.
You looked it up. Oh my God.
I read through it all and I started sharing it with everyone. I was like, this is what Caryn's been talking about.
This is clearly the shortened version.
Oh my God, I could make an audiobook. Tessa, December project, audiobook. We have Blackstone Publishing in Ashland. We can make this happen. Ellie, you got it? Anyway.
Who plays you in the movie? That's the question. You do?
Obviously, Deana.
Deana does. Okay.
Twinsies. I think the reality, right, is that, you have to go slow to go fast, right? We hear it all the time. My background is in public health and community development. I'm a big data nerd. I'm a big policy nerd. Like, I would much rather play with spreadsheets than people, right? I get spreadsheets. People baffle me. And the more people you invite to these tables that we set up, the messier those tables get, right? But we had the luxury because we received funding from the Red Cross. We received funding from Business Oregon. I think Marta ran off to go solve the world's problems somewhere else again. That was navigated through the city of Phoenix as part of the Municipal Wildfire Assistance Program, right? That helped us launch this effort. And so we worked with Urban Design Associates who did the disaster recovery plan for Paradise. And through all of my sort of little kid sister energy, I was able to work and help others see their role in creating this, right? We got 21 partners signed on to that. If you're in this room and you were part of that process, raise your hand. Oh, there you go. It takes all of us. And right, the funding wasn't, you will get this done by here. It was, we see what you want to accomplish and we're here to support you, right? And so that multi-year effort, which I started November 1st of 2021 when I took this position, allowed me the opportunity to build those relationships, to figure out what that compliance versus commitment, yep, right, what that navigated to be able to bring organizations like Oregon Housing and Community Services and the Oregon Department of Emergency Management on assigned partners. Like that's huge, right? And so that is a neighbor to neighbor from the top down, bottom up, local, state, federal partnership that helped us make that a reality. So.
Great, thank you. And is this is available where?
Oh yeah, if you go to roguereimagined.org.
Okay.
Oh yeah, org. There's a lot of orgs in this room.
Yep, a lot of orgs. Great. We heard yesterday from the teams that were talking about the legal services and the SIT. And I just want to point out, maybe you can say a little bit more, Deana, about the SIT and the successful model of what happened with the integration team.
I feel like I should hand the mic over to Melissa Bauer, who's emphatically shaking her head no. But I think the highlights, not to drone on too long, but the highlight about service integration team SIT, and that it existed starting in 2017 officially, but even prior to that, remind me, I think it was called the Canyon Collaborative. And it was so simple. It was once a month or so, a group of folks just got together, had lunch or coffee, and talked about, I have a family that needs shoes. Melissa mentioned yesterday, 3 pastors from 3 different churches are there. There's the school districts there. And Elena's nodding her head. You were involved too. So, and it was organic. It was local. It was nimble. And it evolved into SIT. And then, you know, we talked about COVID hits, and then it went mobile, and then organically we responded to the fires. And so I think the takeaway that I would just beg everyone to consider is we talk about replicating that model, which is great. We can encourage it, but it's going to look different in the Santiam Canyon than what it does for you, what it does for you, just like all of our responses have been different. And so I would just really advocate that we encourage and empower community to build that model, but it has to be unique to that area. And it might be multiple little towns. It might be an unincorporated village, but I really would ask that we resist trying to mandate and officiate a model that would then be implemented and overseen by another agency. I just think whatever we could do to organically encourage our communities to do that, that's just me. I don't think it's going to work in the same way that we resisted FEMA coming in and said, you guys need to start an LTRG. And we said the same thing. No, we got it. We don't need to do that. And here I am, LTRG.
Board chair of the LTRG. Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I would say. Like, rather than more agency support, more like how do we organically support that and encourage communities to talk to each other? So no, go.
Go ahead, Caryn. Go ahead.
I think that, right, what is replicable, right, is the flexibility that we offer to communities through unrestricted funding that enables us to come up with our own creative solutions, right? I firmly believe the answer is in the room. We don't need FEMA to give us a template that doesn't actually work for us, right? We broke that. I think Director, I know Aaron, I don't know what your last name is. I'm sorry. Director Aaron, right? Director Aaron encouraged us to break it, right? And that's what we did with the FEMA template. We broke it. It was broken before we got it. So I think what is replicable in this is the flexible funding that enables communities to have conversations with itself that aren't about competing for dollars, that aren't about, well, I need this and you need that, but I need it, you're going to get it at my expense. You know, it's about creating those moments and those spaces where we can have those conversations around what is and isn't working, of no consequence to some other outside organization's line item or strategic plan, right? We need ourselves more than ever. Help us get the time and space to figure out what we can do.
Great. Thank you. I'll ask this, and if no one wants to handle this, I'll jump in and do it for you. What role would you estimate political considerations played or should not play in the wildfire recovery and response?
He's calling me out right now. So normally anything I do where it involves speaking in front of people, I give my disclaimer that I have no filter. And I tend to just say things are what they are, right? So Douglas County got caught in the middle of a political battle. Our politics at a local level did not align necessarily with the politics of our state at the time. And because of that, there are always repercussions. And I think whether I've painted a target on myself or not for saying that out loud, that should never be the case, right? The actions of politics should not directly affect people in a disaster or the people on the ground that don't have a choice. But we had funding that either came to us very indirectly, or we had to seek out on our own because we weren't getting assistance at a county level. Our town is unincorporated, meaning we're kind of the county's responsibility. We have to remind them of that quite frequently. So we depended on that. And because of the political climate at the time, our community kind of suffered in a way. And I think that's definitely something I don't know how we fix, or if there is a fix or a solution for it. But I think maybe a start is acknowledging that it happens. And I think it happens in more than just our area. So did I jump on the grenade enough?
Yeah, no, that was good. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you being willing to step out there and state that. This issue of politics just absolutely has to be left out of any kind of response and recovery. I think we can all imagine that very easily, and yet it filters its way in. And it filters its way in not just in legislative decisions around how funding is appropriated, but also filters in across agencies, right? We know that there were some cross-agency turf wars. And if any of you are willing, I wanted to talk a little bit about this sort of jurisdictional experiences you may have had. We've got city people here, we've got county people here, we have state people here, we have federal people here, right? And so what community needs is for each of you to work nimbly and asymmetrically. And that's not easily done. We recognize that, but I heard time and time again throughout this conference, different people from government talking about not making it the responsibility of a disaster survivor to have to navigate the systems of government. And yet that isn't really what happened, right? So I don't know if any of you want to step on that landmine.
I would like a little more clarity.
Well, I think it's this issue of, and I'm going to call her out because she would never, and she's going to be embarrassed that I even say this, but Beth Otto with FEMA, I think probably the only FEMA person left here. Are you? Yeah. So thanks for being here. So she lands in RSF 1, right? RSF because they're federal. There you go. Recovery Support Function 1, right? And she has an off the books community engagement model that is bar none. It is not FEMA doctrine though. And again, I'm not saying this for you, but FEMA doctrine is very much open mic night, right? So everybody's seen like Parks and Rec, where Leslie Knope has the people who come up to the front of the room and they all state their concerns and then she writes them down, but really nothing gets done, right? A lot of the way that the initial year of engagement happened was not built out of any kind of a real community engagement model. And we have this expertise around the state of Oregon through these organizations that now exist, but in many cases existed as individuals or existed as groupings before that could move flexibly and easily into that space. And so again, we're going to contact Rep Hoyle and see if they should just adopt your model and call it the Beth Otto, doctrine for community mobilization, because it's the right way to do community mobilization, but it's not the way FEMA does it, right? So in your experiences, and at the danger of letting Caryn get a mic again, the regional long-term recovery plan, who funded this? Okay, so the state did have some skin in this game. Can you say that again?
Red Cross and Business Oregon, I'm still waiting for my reimbursement from business.
Oh, okay.
But I have faith because the state works seamlessly.
Yes, yes. Well, reimbursement is a model, and I appreciated Rep Conrad is serving on that task force. We passed a bill, and I worked last session to pass a bill to get rid of reimbursement as a means of grant making in Oregon. We've also gotten that introduced at the federal level. So there was a bill that was introduced just last week to do this at the federal level, where you won't be able to make grant making the way that you used to, HUD. There will be changes coming. We have to have changes. We can't have this color of money issue keep happening. And what's happened is, and I think across every one of your cases, you've filled the breach of the funds with very precious, unrestricted private money that goes away eventually. Philanthropy cannot fill the hole that government can fill. And so waiting around for the 420 million to come, how many people have you already housed in your unmet needs group? So that's, in other words, the groups of people who won't get housing through some other.
Where's my spreadsheet?
Just round up.
So let's say 360 individuals, they said. So let's just call it like 2.3 people per household. So like what, a little over 140 maybe households that we've stably rehoused. And I want to put a super big, not invisible caveat on that, right? Stably rehoused in that they thought their recovery was done.
Right.
And we know for a fact, I have shared this privately with some of you, what the outcomes of one of those stably households was. And so mental health crisis had to be activated to respond to that. And so the consequences of this complexity, the consequences of these delays, the consequences of the red tape, the consequences of us trying to uphold and keep connected a very fractured system of which all individuals are part of, means that we are breaking, and we are breaking every day.
Yeah.
I think what Karen's trying to say is there's a difference between being rehoused and recovered. And so everybody's speaking a different language to each other, right? So she's saying however many were rehoused. That I don't know that they're all recovered. I think we all get different numbers from different people, right? So in Lincoln County, ODHS closed over 260 something cases. That's awesome. What does that mean to me? That they're closed because there's nothing else you could do for them? There's no programs because OHCS hasn't rolled out the Re-Oregon program. They're closed because they're rehoused. They're closed because they have PTSD and they refuse to answer their phones and continue working with their case management, which I would say is a majority of the people, okay? They are, being hunted down by their case managers. And at whatever point, these case managers have enough secondary trauma that they are done working with those people as well, because they don't have the mental capacity to deal with that survivor's addiction issues or domestic violence issues, or putting themselves in scary situations to try to get that person into a stable living situation. Yeah. And so, sorry, kind of went there with it, but that's the reality of a lot of us working in this room. That's the type of stuff that's on the top of our mind every day. And I think it's a serious thing that we need to address, just the mental health portion of it. And I was
Yeah.
really happy with the last panel, and I really appreciate the work that y'all are doing and everything that Christy had to say. I think that piece needs to be part of whatever we're planning and doing moving forward, and whatever ODHS ORM decides to do moving forward. Where is the mental health for your case managers? We can't have a revolving door of them. Where is the mental health piece, where services funding for us to have programs to support the survivors? Because what do you do? Like you say they're rehoused, they're not recovered if we're talking about recovery.
Yeah, and there's common definitions. Those common definitions have been a problem throughout, right? Each of the line departments, the different jurisdictions are using different terms on what it means to be recovered, or what it means to be rehoused, or being an unmet need. So I'm recognizing time here, and I wanted to see if there are any questions. I can keep talking and asking questions of the panel, but are there any questions any of you had? Or any additional information? Director McMahon.
Thank you. I appreciate the feedback, and I'd really love to just talk to the groups more. So I don't want to, but I do want to ask this question as it relates to the templates and the structure that can be provided at the state level. Is there value in providing you the framework and then allowing you the flexibility to implement? I'm getting a little bit of mixed messaging. On some level, I hear the stress and the lack of resources and capacity. So I'm trying to think of how can we best provide you the tools that you can use to execute. And at what level, how deep do you want that support so that we can best support you? Because we do have more resources. And then the other piece of that, as it relates to the money of the management, there's a little bit of a trade there, right? Because on some level, having to be accountable for the expenditures because of federal monies that might be involved or state monies that might be involved is not a pressure that you then want to have at your level. You want the flexibility, but you don't want to have to be audited, because then that creates more pressure. So how can we create systems? And that's what we're looking at. How can we create tools that make it so that it's easy for you to be accountable without realizing that you're being accountable, such that you have more flexibility, right? And so I just would be interested in a discussion more about what that looks like for you going forward. Thank you.
Well, I think we talked about this yesterday a little bit, Director McMahon. Let us be there with you while you're building this framework. Let us be part of that discussion with you, because all of us, it's throughout the whole state of Oregon. We've been doing this for the last 3 years. So let us help you with that. On the funding side of things, yes, funding's needed. ODHS has been wonderful to work with. They've been helping us with the case management side of things. The contracts haven't been overcomplicated, but it would be nice to continue to sit down and discuss those contracts with you and how they could be more flexible. I had a conversation yesterday with OHCS about that, because our contract we received was 44 pages. I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand, everything in there. And then we have to pay a lawyer or pay somebody to look at it. So it's, how can we sit down with you and look at these contracts and have a better understanding of what we're signing up for? Because we want to be great community partners. We want to be great state partners. And we want to be an example for the rest of the United States. So we want to be here for everyone, and we want to help you do your job.
Yeah.
I think for us, maybe saying unrestricted or more flexible funds is probably way too broad of a term. I know one of our big frustrations we feel a lot of times is that the funding leaves a ton of people out. And so we're constantly trying to come up with ways, the program director and I constantly have meetings of how can we jigsaw together enough funding from enough different sources that we can meet this one need for this person? Or how do we tell these people, because they make $500 over annually, what the requirement is, and yet they can't financially support rebuilding, there's no help we can give them. And so I think for me, when I talk about like flexibility of the funding, I get both sides of it. I'm a little like her. I'd rather play with the spreadsheet than other people. I need my own sandbox. So, but I understand the value in collecting all that data, right? Because not only do we need to be accountable and show where the money went, because it is tax money in some places, and I want to know where my money went, but we also need to gather like how many people have been helped, what were the needs, so that we can prepare for the next disaster. The hard part that comes of that is when that process slows down getting the help out to the point where it now takes 3 people to do a job that should take 1 person. And yet we only have funding to pay 1 person to do the job. So I think for me and our organization, that's where some of our like wanting more flexibility comes from. And I don't pretend to have an answer or to know what it is, but I think having more people at that initial table and discussion that have done the work on the ground would be a huge benefit to everyone.
Thank you, Jeana. Caryn?
You know, one of the things that I have really wanted to see, and so I'm excited that you are in this position now, right? I've wanted to see stronger leadership and ownership of the disaster cycle from emergency management, right? When I think about my role as a director, I have staff that I deploy to meet the mission that I have co-created with my board, right? As the expert, right? You have been paid and tapped as the expert in emergency management in this state. Understanding how to mobilize and deploy those resources like ODHS, like OHCS, like Oregon Health Authority and Business Oregon, and all the other ones I'm forgetting. There's land and people everywhere, right? That's your wheelhouse. That is yours to own and to figure out how to deploy those resources so that the experience on the ground is seamless, right? Because what I keep coming back to is that systems are complex. We are not naive or arrogant enough to think that we can just universally eject complexity, right? But the experience on the ground doesn't need to be. And the experiences of that complexity are lethal. They result in deaths of despair. They result in increased family violence, increased substance abuse, increased levels of people who will never get out of poverty because they've now slid into it permanently because of this last disaster. And so how we work together is critical, right? To design systems within our control so that future communities don't report the same lessons learned. None of us wants to do this disaster again. We want to do it better. And so I'm super excited to see how your leadership will shape conversations around the disaster cycle for our communities.
Thank you, Caryn. Looks like Josh has a question in the back there. Or was there somebody? Sorry. Okay.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, members. So I'm Alex Kyler. I'm Lane County's lobbyist. I'm a registered lobbyist in the state of Oregon, but I work for the county. I am really struck by this conversation in the last couple of days because I've been lobbying for resources, both the state and federal level, since the Labor Day fires. I've gotten great support from the counties, right? We get 8 counties logos on letters. We tried to make sure that the special House Committee on Wildfire Recovery existed in 23 because we were very nervous about without it, we weren't going to be able to have good conversations. We were unsuccessful in that effort. And one of the things that I'm struck by is that, the Association of Oregon Counties doesn't really like to work on things that are subsets of the association as 36 counties. So we didn't get a lot of support from them for wildfire recovery, but I think I'm the only lobbyist in the room. And what I need are more voices in Salem. And I want to encourage this group, and I would love to work with you, Jim, to make sure that we can get these organizations situated so that they are comfortable with advocacy work and within the frameworks. But Jeana, you can go to Salem. Yeah, that's the people's building, and anybody is welcome in that building and make their point regardless of the politics at home, right? I mean, I work for Lane County. Our board has switched from left to right, from left to right, from left to right, and I still go up there and advocate for them, and members still listen.
Yeah, I think that's
so. I just want to say one thing more, that it's wonderful. Aaron is here. Ed Flick is here. These two know what it takes to get resources, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And we have to work in the Capitol building above the agencies, sometimes alongside them, not always. We're not always going to see eye to eye with them, but we can do it. But we have to get together. And so that's my offer.
Yeah.
I want to work with you, Jim. Let's get these voices up to the building in a collaborated way at the right time to the right people, and we can continue this because here's my worry. $422 million is on the table. It's the last money we've got, right? ARPA, we're probably not going to see that come around again unless some other national tragedy hits. We've got this money through OHCS, but folks, we should have 50 million bucks in each county.
Yep.
And what have we got? We don't have that. We don't have near that. And so we're going to have to work really hard to get those resources flowing into our communities. Thank you.
Thanks for that point. We'd love to work with you on that. Some of this group actually, and I served on the work groups that Rep. Evans and Rep. Gomberg held, not this summer, past summer, to put forward a whole slate of bills that all died in committee this year, unfortunately. And this was pre-walkout, I want to be clear. This was before any politics was injected. They died early, right? And they included things like replicating Matt McCrae's role as a recovery manager at counties. They funded things like LTRGs and COADs. All those bills, I think there were 11 of them in total. Several of you were, called in for those. We lobbied, we worked, and they all just sort of went away. And so, yeah, we got to figure out a way to continue to move this energy forward. So I know you're about to drag me off the stage, Ben. Thank you to this group.